Canada. All right. My friend Dominic Marama actually worked with me on weathermodificationhistory.com. And Dominic, he went through 800 plus newspaper articles and collected them all on one page. We have images of newspapers going back to 1889 of news stories of all of the weather modification going on for over 100 years. The fact that this is not common knowledge today is shocking. And it's not, because most people are on their phones watching TikTok or busy playing watching football games. Everybody's so easily distracted. But the point of bringing all this together is that we get clarification, we get notification beforehand when people are going to modify the weather. And of course, the counter argument I always get is, Jim, why not ban it altogether? And I'm for that. I'm totally, if it were in my hands and I were the benevolent dictator of the world, I would say no weather modification, period. End of story. Let God control nature, not man. But the reality of the situation is this is a multi-billion, if not trillion-dollar industry. And that while the media props up global warming and CO2 and cow farts as the number one problem facing humanity, water shortages and plane farts are of a much greater concern to most of the public. And therefore, water as a resource will always try to be scavenged by the vultures in the weather modification industry. There are, an example is Sacramento, California, the Sacramento Municipal Utility District, SMUD. They actually take taxpayer dollars, and then because they run the pipes to all of the companies, the houses in Sacramento, California, they pay a cloud seeding company to then fill their reservoir back up. Now, whether that works or not is a moot point. We're not even going to argue about that. But know that generally speaking, in almost all of the reports that I've read from NOAA that were because of the Weather Modification Reporting Act of 1972, in those you'll see sponsor and you'll see some local counties, municipal utility district, water utility district. So it's your local government taking your tax dollars and giving it to the people controlling the weather, or claiming to at least. So at the end of the day, you need to start as local as possible. It's incumbent on each of you to reach out to your local government and demand accountability. Are you currently in my local town? I'm in Winnipeg. Are you locally paying somebody to modify the weather over Winnipeg? How about in BC? Are you guys paying somebody right now? Because I'm going to tell you this, at least in America, the farther west you go, the more cloud seeding activities you get. So here in America, we have ground-based cloud seeding generators. They're all along the Rocky Mountains. They operate in October through March of every single year, every single day. And their goal is to put as much artificial snow on top of the Rocky Mountains as possible, so that come springtime, when they melt, they fill all the tributaries in the west, which is parched. And that's why we get these crazy winter storms. Now, of course, weather modification advocates will say, there are no downwind effects. What are you talking about, Jim? You're crazy. In 2018, I went to the American Meteorological Society's 109th annual meeting, something like that. But it was in Austin, Texas, and I went specifically to the 21st conference on planned and inadvertent weather modification. I interviewed the scientists themselves Daniel Rosenfeld from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and William Cotton, who did Project Storm Fury, and he basically worked for the United States government to steer hurricanes. I entered the U.S. Naval Research Lab, who ran and operated HARP, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Project up in Geoengineering, Alaska. I interviewed Raytheon, who said all of the weather data you see on TV comes from all of these different sources, and then we feed it into our AWIPS2 software, and then it goes to your local weatherman. And that blew my mind, because then I thought to myself, well, that means that really all the weatherman does is read off a prompt that came to him through a defense contractor. So the military industrial complex is literally the firewall between what's going on in the sky, the actual data, and what you see on your local news broadcast. So I've tried to explore this in every way possible, and the only solution that I see is, one, demand transparency up front. You got to tell us worldwide what you're doing, why you're going to do it, and before you do it. And then on the sensor side, I mentioned to you earlier that nuclear bombs, they have the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty Organization has these infrasound recorders and seismographs worldwide to catch people blowing up nukes. I want all of the governments of the world to combine their efforts to be able to detect weather modification and geoengineering activity. Here's the problem with that. When I spoke to a representative from the National Corporation for Atmospheric Research at that aforementioned weather modification conference, I said to him, hey, I'm thinking about building a climate viewer for your backyard, something that can see the sky, record it, take temperature readings, all the regular weather crap. But I want to build a rainfall sampling device that collects rain and then tells me what chemicals are in the rain, and then streams it live over the internet to a map, my Climate Viewer 3D, and I could actually see, are the chemicals used in weather modification or geoengineering or some of these, that we're all worried about, high amounts of aluminum, barium, strontium, trimethyl aluminum's using sounding rockets, it's a jet exhaust, all of these, the plethora of nanoparticles of metals that are raining down on us on a daily basis, that we start collecting that. The guy from NCAR turned ghost white, because to this day, there is no rainfall sampling network on the planet. Like it's something that does not matter. I think it would matter. I think you could wake up a lot of, people who think they have an organic garden. It's kind of like that Morpheus quote from the Matrix. You think that's air you're breathing? Well, you think that's a organic garden? No, unless you've got a rain filter, argue with somebody about that. So I would like to have not only the governments of the world combine all of their satellite technology and all their billions and trillions of dollars worth of fancy toys to detect atmospheric modification, to detect geoengineering, to detect it in real time and be honest and transparent. I know it's a pipe dream to want your government to be honest with you, but one can try, can't we? So because I don't trust them, I also propose that you create a climate viewer for your background so that we have a publicly owned network of sensors worldwide that works as a backstop and a secondary check for the government's sensor network. The reason I say this is because when Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant melted down in March 11th, 2011, there were emails from Hillary Clinton to her staff that were later leaked that said, guys, it's bad. Don't go out in the rain. I'm going to be personally staying inside for the next 2 weeks because there was radioactive fallout crossing the Pacific and raining down all over BC, all over the west coast of the United States. Meanwhile, President Barack Obama went on TV and said, everything is fine, nothing to worry about here. And the reason I'm making this point is our Environmental Protection Agency operates something called RADNet, the Radiation Network for Radiation Detection Network. They, along with their Canadian counterpart, turned it off during the Fukushima meltdown. You can look this up. This happened. So if the government can't be trusted to ensure the safety of the public during major events like a nuclear meltdown at a power plant, then they surely can't be trusted when their military may be involved and they decide, well, we'll just flip the switch on our sensors for tonight because it's going to get messy and we don't want people to see that. So it's necessary to have both, because whenever all of our publicly available sensors, and I fully believe this is possible with today's technology, easily buildable. When they turn theirs off and ours is still operating, and then we see all of these chemicals, the telltale signatures of geoengineering and weather modification falling from the sky all around us, then we'll know shenanigans are going on. The government shut theirs off. They're lying to us. That's why their network's down, and we've got all of the receipts to prove it. Now, how we hold violators accountable, that's a problem for another day. My hope is that by changing the Environmental Modification Convention, and this is easily done through any member party to the UN Security Council can propose an amendment to it. And it only takes one person. It only takes one person going into the UN Security Council, representing a country, whether it be Canada or the US or wherever. I'll take Angola at this point. And if they were to go in there and say, look, this is outdated, we need to update it. There have been several violators already caught. Most recently, makesunsets.com. If you guys haven't heard about it, you can look that one up, or you can come to @ClimateViewer on YouTube and watch my latest video on it. But Make Sunsets was a startup company in Baja California where this, I'm not going to curse, I swear, this individual decided he was going to geoengineer by throwing balloons into the sky filled with sulfur, and that they would explode in the stratosphere, and he was selling cooling credits. I first brought it to the attention of the world December 4th, which was actually just, I think it was 48 hours after their website went live. I already had some of my hacker buddies emailing me on Twitter, saying, hey, heads up, look at this. These guys say they're geoengineering now. Less than 2 weeks later, they realized the cat was out of the bag. They went to MIT and Harvard and all of these popular science rags to tell their side of the story. The guy's name was Luke Eisman. It was picked up by the Blaze media, and then it made it to a couple other news outlets. And finally, January 13th, the government of Mexico banned geoengineering because of what Make Sunsets had done in Baja over their territory. The problem is geoengineering is already banned. It's called the UN Convention on Biological Diversity in 2010. So at the UN Convention for Biological Diversity in 2010, they agreed that no outdoor geoengineering experiments should occur until adequate scientific basis proves that it's safe and effective. This has not stopped anybody. This has not stopped the Marine Cloud Brightening Project, which is going down on the coast of California. or the marine cloud brightening project over the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, where they're doing marine cloud brightening. Is the idea that you spray sea salt into clouds to make them whiter. And because they are whiter, they reflect more sunlight. These are geoengineering programs going on right now. The ICE 911 project, where they're spreading beads all over the Arctic to reflect sunlight. There's a couple other ones. Of course, David Keith and Bill Gates with their ScopeX project, the Stratospheric Controlled Perturbation Experiment. They tried to launch a balloon in Arizona. I'm friends with the ETC group. If you guys aren't familiar with them, I think that you should definitely coalition with them. But the ETC group is the only non-governmental organization that has actively stopped a geoengineering experiment to date. There was one back in, it was a while ago. You can look it up on the timeline, weathermodificationhistory.com. It was called the SPICE project, Stratospheric Particle Injection for Climate Engineering. And they wanted to do the exact same thing that I just described. They wanted to tug a balloon behind a plane to spray chemicals into the clouds to make them whiter, brighter. The ETC group lobbied the United Nations and many countries. And finally, this group from the UK said, okay, to hell with it. We will not do it. And they stopped the SPICE project. Flash forward to the Marine Cloud Brightening Project. They're doing it all, the exact same thing all over again, except now it's really reaching the mainstream media. It's reaching the big donors. In fact, George Soros just said that he would like to commit money to whitening clouds over Greenland. This news story, I have it up right here on the screen, actually, and I'll check the date on it. February 16th, 2023. Soros suggests controversial solar technology could combat global warming. And there's a whole bunch of other George Soros wants to block Arctic sunlight. Will he fund it? 2 days ago. Why billionaires are obsessed with blocking out the sun. 1 day ago. New York Times. Time Magazine. So this is only accelerating. And then when you have a unlimited wealth person like George Soros now wanting to throw money at it, you already have Bill Gates throwing money at it. We already see what's going on in the sky with the plane farts. It's time for people to act. You know, we have enough information to act. It's incumbent on each individual to get educated about it so that you cannot be easily argued with. Whenever you first reach out to your representative, the first line of defense is the representative's aide, who's usually a college age kid on a cell phone, who's like, yeah, we got this call, this email from this person. They're concerned about this or that. And of course, the typically old, bald, white guy is going to say, well, what's that? And they're going to the young kid's going to look back at him that actually types the emails and say, oh, that's just this chemtrail conspiracy. It's really about, they're just crazy people. You have to get past that. That conspiracy theorist wall. I've devoted a lot of time to understanding perception management, the use of terminology, to where I could go into the American Meteorological Society and have hour-long discussions with some of the world's top scientists, because when I spoke to them, I spoke their language. When you go to your representative, you need to speak their language. And it sounds something like this. If you ignore our demands, if you call me a conspiracy theorist and decide not to listen to me, we will actively lobby to ensure that your ass does not come back here until we find somebody who will represent us. So in closing, I think that the Environmental Modification Accountability Act is a good start. It, at the very least, if it were to pass, what it would do is cement from now until forever in the public mind that these weather modification and geoengineering activities are occurring, and it would bring much greater public awareness to the subject. And just through raising awareness of the subject would be a self-defeating blow to the global warming alarmists, because now they can't blame every single hurricane, every single weather event on CO2 and cow farts. They will have to answer the question, what role do the climate changers, the weather modification industry, the geoengineers, what role do the climate changers play in this? Quit blaming me until you take accountability for them. And I thank you guys for listening. I'll take any questions as long as I'm able to hear them properly. I'll put it in chat as well, and maybe Derek can actually put that up somewhere. I don't know if that's possible, but it's called the Environmental Modification Accountability Act, or NMODAA, ENMODAA. And it's at climateviewer.com/NMOD, ENMOD. I heard the Turkish earthquake. What was the other one? The storm in New Zealand. So I'm completely clueless on that one. I wear like 13 hats around here, including daddy, father, website designer. I'm currently working as an armed security guard in a courthouse, and my father owns a mobile home park with 96 homes. So I crawl under trailers and fix pipes and things, in addition to being a YouTuber. So yeah, I can't keep up with all the things, but as far as the Turkish earthquake goes, there was, you probably saw the representative, I believe it was from Romania, who made the claim that, Western powers did this to Romania for reasons X, Y, and Z. Now, the reality of tectonic weapons is they are going to vehemently, argue that these things never occurred. But there are earthquake weapons. They are acknowledged in multiple documents that I've read personally. 1 second, let me bring this up. And where is it at? So the two Soviet secret programs, Mercury and Volcano, came to light. And it's Project Mercury, Project Volcano. The idea that the Russians were working on tectonic weapons. The common conception here is that through either extremely powerful, very low frequency, extremely low frequency waves, that one could shake loose, or at least shake something along a fault line, trigger magnetic field lines. This is called geophysical warfare. The idea that you could modify the electrical properties of the planet to then set off tectonic pressure. The problem with that argument in Turkey is that magnetic field lines don't land in Turkey. So that one kind of takes the whole HARP did it off the table. The secondary thing is that when the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear meltdown happened, it's been widely discussed in scientific circles that the atmosphere above Fukushima heated rapidly before the earthquake occurred. The ionosphere heated rapidly before the earthquake, before the 9.0 earthquake that tilted the axis of the entire freaking planet. So the scientific community makes the argument that because the earth was building up pressure and because the ground was fracturing, that radiation was released from within stored rock, and that heated the ionosphere. And that is a early warning or detection system that could be implemented for earthquakes. However, at least the people in this room know that there are things called ionospheric heaters. And ionospheric heaters do what? They heat the ionosphere. So did HARP, which is on the exact magnetic field line that passes over Fukushima, and it has what's called a conjugate point. So looking for something round. If you have the Earth right here, this would come out and then come around to the bottom. That's your conjugate point. So they fire it out of the North Pole, it goes all the way around, it comes into the South Pole. That's how the Van Allen belts, if you will. So as energy flows out over that Van Allen belt and then it comes down to right off the coast of Australia, where HARP is located, that's where those signals would go. Radiation precipitates out. That's why I refer to this as space weather modification. Weather modification, they use cloud seeding. They put chemicals into the sky. Those chemicals attract water. The water precipitates out as rain. Ionospheric heaters, they take electricity, they shoot these bolts of electricity into the sky, and that is plasma seeding, just like cloud seeding, but with plasma, often referred to as the fourth state of matter. So they shoot this energy into space. It collects radiation as it's passing through the Van Allen belts, and that radiation precipitates out. Now, that could be a causal factor in the Fukushima reactor earthquake. But when they go and they blame, like the woman in the Romanian video, she blamed HARP, I think by name in it. It's been a minute since I've watched it. But the bottom line is, if you were going to blame an ionospheric heater for what happened in Turkey, the closest one is in Sura, Russia. But nobody wants to talk about that. And if you look further into her background specifically, she is a communist sympathizer. She is a communist communicator. So, and I only know this because I was invited on, quite frankly, to talk about this. So I did a little background research, and you give me a name and I'll tell you all the dirt about the person you ever wanted to know. And very quickly, it came to my attention that she had said a lot of other really crazy things over the years, but she certainly referred to the Ukraine as Zelensky's war. And, basically, if you watch the entire unedited version of her clip, she basically says Putin's the good guy, and poor old Putin, Ukraine's so mean to Putin. So she clearly has a bias. She also claimed there were no epicenters for the two major earthquakes. That is also false. So I find a lot of problems with her story, but at the end of the day, the idea of a tectonic or earthquake weapon is a real possibility. Of course, Mythbusters says that they completely debunked Nikola Tesla's oscillating machine. But I'm not going to I take that with a grain of salt, because you ain't Nikola Tesla, bro. And hundreds, if not thousands of people reported what Nikola Tesla did when he turned his oscillator on. And as a guy who runs around on the internet for more than 35 years with a nickname Resonated, REZNAD, I understand how things resonate. I understand there are resonant frequencies that can destroy matter. Each one of you in this room has a resonant frequency. If a signal powerful enough that was the exact frequency of the resonant frequency of your body reached out and touched you, you would burst into pieces. This is just a simple fact of matter. All matter has some resonant frequency. You guys know what I'm talking about when you see the resonant frequency of glass, and somebody who can hit that high pitch can shatter the glass. It vibrates so quickly that it shatters. So in the case of a tectonic weapon or earthquake weapon, resonant frequencies, extremely low frequencies, frequency matters, but it would have to be deployed locally, in my personal opinion. So if it were a man-made earthquake, it would be something probably the size of a semi-tractor trailer truck, type weapon that would have to be driven to the location and have enough power to do it. It simply seems unfeasible. The other possibility is underground nuclear explosion. Multiple documented cases of creating earthquakes with that, because since the Limited Test Ban Treaty in 1958, they have been burying bombs underground and detonating them. They're not allowed to detonate them in the atmosphere anymore. So they're still blowing up nukes today, everybody. They just do it underground. But that's another possibility for creating an earthquake. I hope that answers your question. So great question. So there's two theories on this. And I think that everybody in life wants a simple answer, just a catch all. Give me the one sentence answer that, I can now know this person did this thing and I can blame it all on them. I'm going to give you two different answers. They're going to conflict a little bit, but you'll understand why I'm doing this. All of the chemicals that have ever been documented to come out of chemtrails that, and words matter here. Chemtrail, contrail, persistent contrail, aviation-induced cloudiness, plane farts. I like to call them plane farts. Keeps it real simple for me. So planes fart, and what comes out? It's the exact same thing as cloud seeding. There are little seeds in that water vapor. Now, a lot of people will say, if you call any government agency, they aren't chemtrails, they are contrails. They are merely condensation trails. The next time you hear that load of crap, I want you to ask them this question. Condensating on what? Now, the reason that's important is because in cloud seeding and in weather modification technologies, the idea is that you put nanoparticles of silver iodide in the sky, and water condenses. It is attracted to it. So once you have water condense and attract and get stuck on the little seed, a cloud seed, eventually enough water vapor collects to where it can no longer float, and then it falls as rain. The problem with planes is where they're putting their little pollutant pellets, which are basically black carbon black dust. This is sometimes referred to as soot, but that's incorrect. There is soot, there's black carbon, and there's carbon black dust. All three are coming out of the back of the planes. They are excellent cloud seeding material. They are filled with every type of man-made metal you can think of in nanoparticles. They have a grape-like structure, and they create clouds. These clouds, when Ulrich Lohmann from one of those European Union, European states where they talk real funny, Ulrich Lohmann flew up into the clouds and said that when they went through the cirrus clouds, because at the end of the day, chemtrail, contrail, persistent contrail, aviation-induced cloudiness, plane farts, I don't care what you call them, once they fan out and cover the entire sky, they are no longer any of those things. They are now a cirrus cloud. And cirrus clouds, CIRRUS, cirrus clouds are ice clouds. So what we are seeing are, and Ulrich Lohmann found this to be true as well, 75% of the cloud seeds in cirrus clouds were man-made metals. So one could make the argument that these are metal clouds. Now, that's one of the reasons that prompted me to go to the Environmental Protection Agency. I basically created a hearing here in Washington, D.C., in the United States, because they asked for public opinion on Obama and company limiting greenhouse gas emissions from aircraft under the Clean Air Act here in America. And I said, well, that sounds like kind of a violation of the spirit of the law, because nobody ever was harmed by CO2. But we are harmed by metals, nanoparticles of metals and chemicals that are coming out of planes, and nobody's ever held them accountable. Not to mention the clouds, the cirrus clouds created by planes, actually trap more heat than they cool the planet. They create a blanket over the planet. During 9/11, when the Twin Towers were attacked in New York, they found that they grounded all flights. I can see I'm not going to age shame anybody because I'm getting old myself, but y'all, I can tell by this crowd, you guys remember this day. So in 2001, they grounded all flights for 3 days. And guess what happened? There were no clouds. Is that a surprise to anybody here? I don't think so. And then Patrick Menace and David Travis from doesn't matter. They're science dorks. They wrote a paper that basically said that during that time, the diurnal temperature range varied to a great extent. To explain this in redneck terms, normally during the day, let's say it's 80 degrees. I'm not very good at centigrade, guys. Sorry, I have Celsius. All right. Let's say it's 80 degrees Fahrenheit during the day. It drops down to 60 degrees at night on a cloudy night. So that's a 20-degree difference between the hottest hot of the day and then the coolest it got that night. On a cloudless night, it went from 80 to 40 or 80 to 50. That's what's called the diurnal temperature range. So what they realized was that the cloud blankets created by all of these planes, by the chemicals that are naturally present in the jet fuel, to answer the person's question, in addition to fuel additives, there are many different chemical cocktails added to jet fuel, like biocides, anti-freezing agents, anti-static agents. An example of an anti-static agent is called Status 450. It's dinonyl naphthyl sulfonic acid. That's a mouthful. Denza. It is a barium salt. So when they add these chemicals like the barium salt, that anti-static agent is so that whenever they go to refuel the plane, static doesn't jump from the plane to the fuel hose and cause the whole plane to blow up and kill people. This was a very big problem back in Vietnam. Basically, they would shoot AK-47s at RF-4 Phantom fighter planes, and because of the low flash point of gasoline jet fuel, they would explode. So they switched to kerosene based because it has a much higher flash point. But they still had accidents. So since the 1960s, they've been adding anti-static agents to jet fuel. I could go on ad nauseum about all the chemicals that are in the jet fuel, but trust me, if you want to look into it, you can go to climateviewer.com/cirrus clouds matter. It's a play on you know what. But anyway, cirrus clouds matter. And you'll see that basically all of those chemicals are already in the jet fuel. And as a result of that 9/11 grounding, they determined that basically cirrus clouds were trapping heat around the globe, and that if they didn't get rid of them at nighttime, that basically they're creating a blanket, the Venus effect, if you will. So that's one of the big problems. Now, on the flip side, that accounts for commercial aviation, all of the different companies. Could they have pipes and pumps? Sure. But is it likely? Not likely. The majority of the pictures floating around the internet that have been sent to me, I've been able to verify the sources of every single one. I have never been able to track down a picture of a pump or a pipe that I didn't know exactly where it came from. And 99% of the photos that I've seen have either been firefighting equipment or ballast tanks. So ballast tanks, or whenever they design a new aircraft or they're testing a redesign of an aircraft, they put tanks inside the plane, they fill them with water, and they simulate a fat guy getting up out of his seat in row 2A and going to the bathroom real quick. So they rush a whole lot of water from one tank over here to over here, and then from left to right real fast to see if they could, basically throw the plane off. And a lot of people have propagated these photos as evidence of chemtrail spraying equipment. It's not so. Now I'm going to play devil's advocate and flip the entire script. The military in 1958 here in America, the United States Navy, Dr. Florence Van Straten, we have the original newspaper article. I have an Associated Press photo of her right over here in my desk drawer, an original from the 50s. Dr. Florence Van Straten created and destroyed clouds using carbon black dust for the U.S. Navy. She said that we suspended it in a liquid and we made mile-long clouds. We dumped dry bags of carbon black dust into those same clouds and got rid of those clouds so they could create or destroy clouds on command. And in the three newspapers that we have on the story, three separate newspaper sources on this story, Lady Meteorologist Creates, Destroys Clouds, Ordinary Carbon Black Use. That's the title. She said that it cost the whole project, aside from the flight cost $5 to do what they did. Now, if you're wondering what black carbon dust looks like, go to your neighborhood laser jet printer and pull the toner cartridge out and dump that black stuff on the ground. That's carbon black dust. This is the military's preferred way of creating clouds. Has been since 1958, is still in use today. If you heard of the Air Force 2025 documents, there was a particular paper that caught a lot of people's attention. It's called Weather as a Force Multiplier, Owning the Weather in 2025. There happens to be a technology chart in there, and it says, with a little star, technologies to be developed by the Department of Defense, CBD. And we're not talking about cannabinoid oil. So get your heads out of the gutter. It's carbon black dust. 1976, William, doesn't matter. We'll keep it simple here. Carbon black dust, absorption of solar radiation for steering hurricanes, 1976. And then you flash forward to 2008, the Department of Homeland Security here in America had a hurricane modification workshop. What did Mosh Alamaro from MIT University say? Hey, why don't we dump a bunch of carbon black dust into the hurricane to steer it? The reason this is true is because when you have a hurricane, not only is carbon black dust an amazing cloud seed, comes out of the back of jet planes as plane farts, makes cirrus clouds, makes people mad. But if you were to have the military doing it, they could dump large portions of carbon black dust into a hurricane If anybody here has a black car on a sunny day and you've set your bare naked hiney on the hood, you realize that black absorbs heat. Doesn't reflect it, it absorbs it. So the idea being that you could put a lot of carbon black dust into a hurricane, the sun's rays would heat that portion of the hurricane and alter the path of it. I have not one, not two, but 3 Freedom of Information Act requests from the United States government on weather modification. This was done by the Sunshine Project, sunshineproject.org. It's been deleted from the internet. I found it on the archive.org website, the Wayback Machine. And these are all available on weathermodificationhistory.com's timeline. In these Freedom of Information Act requests, they literally say, Wright Patterson Air Force Base, carbon black dust weather modification for use in weather warfare technologies. U.S. Navy, China Lake Naval Warfare Center, carbon black dust delivery system for weather warfare. And then, of course, all the debunkers online said, well, owning the weather in 2025 was just a think piece, Jim. Why are you acting like it's real? Dr. Arnold J. Barnes from the Phillips Laboratory at Hanscom Air Force Base attended a joint Air Force Army meeting in 1997 called Weather Modification Test Technology Symposium 1997. And he gave a PowerPoint presentation, which I downloaded from archive.org on army.mil. So it came directly from the United States Army's military website. It is real. In his PowerPoint presentation, he has 2 slides. Cloud seeding using carbon black dust. And he cites all of the reasons giving and owning the weather in 2025. Make it rain, make it stop raining, all of the reasons. And it said, create, suppress, cirrus/contrails. He ended that PowerPoint presentation with current capabilities. And by current, obviously, he meant in 1997 when he gave the speech. Current capabilities, laser hole boring, being able to bore holes in the sky using lasers so they can transmit to satellites, ionospheric modification, things like HARP. HARP had just been built in 1994, wasn't full power till later. And then there it is, crystal clear. Cloud modification, create, suppress, cirrus, contrails. So they can create or destroy these clouds on command using carbon black dust, the militaries of the world. This has been a long known technology all the way back to 1958. The military can deploy clouds at any time. So you have to be asking yourself right now, why? Why, Jim? Why the hell would the military want to create clouds? Well, guess what? Dr. Arnold J. Barnes told us why also in that PowerPoint presentation. To block out satellite spy surveillance and to make nighttime operations more feasible. So if the military has, say, Area 51 has their latest stealth bomber out, they won't want the Chinese to see it from their spy satellites. They can go out and create clouds for next to nothing, very cheap. And they could block out the sun. They could block out the skies. Nobody in space can see what's going on, and they can fly under those clouds. Secondly, during the Iraqi war, Operation Desert Storm in particular, it was noted that there were particularly dark nights. And what strategic advantage did the United States military have over the Iraqi Republican Guard? Night vision. So if you already had, let's say, not a full moon, and it was pretty darn dark, and then you decided to cover the entire sky in clouds, it'd get real dark. I mean, like, can't see your hand in front of your face dark, which gives a strategic advantage to the military when they have night vision goggles, obviously. And they have it on all of their military equipment. The Iraqis' T-80 tanks, they did not have that. Soviets didn't think to include night vision goggles in their tanks. So on the one side, you've got the military saying we can make clouds anywhere, anytime, or we can make sure that we don't have clouds, because you don't want a bomber leaving a white stripe in the sky. It's kind of like making a big white arrow that says, shoot me down. Am I right? So they have the ability to either create or destroy or stop the production of cirrus clouds, because it's bad for stealth. Obviously, it's bad for bombers. You don't want your bomber getting shot down because some idiot can see it just with the naked eye. Why'd you go put all that stealth radar crap on a plane if I can just see that it's right there and then just aim at it with a heat-seeking missile? And then simultaneously, they can create clouds at any point. So you've got the commercial side. My answer is, my final answer, I'm sticking to it. Everything necessary to create cirrus clouds coming from planes is in the jet fuel, is in the fuel itself, without even putting the first additive in it. And that's because it's kerosene, and it naturally has, high levels of, all of the metals, the aluminum, calcium, strontium, vanadium, molybdenum, zirconium, selenium. I've got an entire periodic table of what they found in jet exhaust. And I have 5 different sources now. One, the U.S. Air Force, 2, Ulrich Lohmann, and then I have 3 other sources. They all say the same tale. Jet fuel has metal in it. Metal gets burned. It doesn't get completely burned up. It ends up in the clouds. It rains down on you. And I'll leave you with this last little monkey wrench. Dr. Chuck Long from the Earth Systems Research Lab said that planes are accidentally geoengineering the planet. This is on the Smithsonian Magazine website. This is all over the internet. Airplane contrails may be accidentally geoengineering the world. What Chuck Long found in his paper was like evidence of clear sky brightening. That basically not even the clouds we're seeing are the problem. The problem is subvisual, as he put it, that planes are creating a subvisual ice haze, which is whitening the sky. Now, all you know this to be true because you can just go outside on any given day, given the bluest sky you could possibly imagine. And if you look straight up, it's mostly blue. And as you look further towards the horizon, it gets whiter and whiter till you see a milky white horizon. That's the bajillion ice crystals that are building up in the upper atmosphere, which are changing the radiation budget of the planet, which are literally in some places changing the sun from a golden yellow to white. This all comes from air traffic pollution. That is, all of these nanoparticles of chemicals coming out of jet exhaust are filling the sky. They have unknown effects on the global weather systems, on rainfall patterns, on human health. And this has been going on since the early 60s. And nothing has been done to stop it. Chuck Long was one of the only scientists to ever say it out loud. He didn't call it accidental geoengineering. He just called it geoengineering. But of course, all of the media headlines came out. Aircraft are accidentally geoengineering the planet. MIT University likewise said the same thing about ship tracks coming from bunker fuel, heavy fuel oil using tankers in the Pacific Ocean that bring us all of our crap from China to sell you in your local store. So we have a cloud problem for sure. It's understanding how those clouds got there, where, when, and why that really is the real question to be asking of regulators and authorities. I hope that answers your question.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for having me. And just, it's on the Geoengineering Free Canada website. You can't argue with it. It only takes a small group of dedicated individuals to change the planet. In fact, it's the only thing that ever did. I see a small group. Go out and change the world, people. I'm going to go ahead and turn these bright lights off, and I'm going to go lay in a corner and hold my head because I am very good at faking the fact that I'm not in severe pain with a migraine. I love you guys. I mean it. And I hope that you guys will spread the message. Do the research and, go out there and change the world. And bravo to you for hosting this event. I really appreciate it.